This morning I'm going to do some pruning work along the corner of our living wall, and in particular what I'd like to do is do some pretty, to some extent, severe seeming pruning on these big alders overhead. By all intents and purposes, this will be chop and drop of tree branches and leaves to support the next succession, which I'm going to talk about in more detail. So if you're interested in the idea of managing trees and shrubs with hand tools and pruning in order to boost the fertility and select for other plants, this video may be for you, so stick around. We planted out this living wall about 5 years ago to protect us and our chickens from the feeling of the road, the very busy and loud road that's right next to us. And part of the design with this was to set in motion certain elements that we knew would grow incredibly fast. They would give us privacy very quickly, they would bulk out lots of organic matter very quickly, and we from the outset had the intention of cutting them back to select for other plants in the future. The future is now, and so what we're seeing, for example, these are alders that, if you can imagine, were only 6 to 8 inches tall when we first put them in, and they are on silly high density. In fact, some of them are 8 inches, 12 inches apart. You can see there's two that are right next to each other. Now, for the long term, if we were to plant these out with the idea of we're going to plant these and never interact with them again, this is a ridiculously tight planting. But for the idea of let's grow these quickly and then have all of this biomass which can then be cut to support slower plants, then it works out really well. In this case, what we've done is this spring added in some other elements that in the future will be our long-term successional plan. These are English walnuts, or Juglans regia. They grow a little bit slowly, but they can be beautiful stately trees in the long run. There's 2 of them here, so they can pollinate each other. There's a red bud and another red bud, which can help to promote more nitrogen. We may chop and drop these plants as well in the future. You can see all this jewelweed and chicory and mint, some of which we planted, some we did not. They're all welcome to be here. But if we modify this alder now, bring its canopy way, way down, and harvest that biomass to support these next levels of succession, we don't have to bring in mulch from off-site. We'll hold more moisture in the ground, we'll liberate nutrients and nitrogen to support these other plants and kind of shape things to work for the future for us. So that's what I'm going to be getting into. In the very most basic sense of the idea of chop and drop, one may take a branch from a tree or a shrub or even an herbaceous perennial, and to whatever level of detail you want, you would chop it. You could simply drop it, putting it near a plant that you want to support. You could take it and chop, 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 drop it. You could run it through a chipper if you want, but I would really encourage you to skip that. We're not in a huge rush for this to be perfect mulch right away. And if aesthetically we don't like the look of that, cool. We'll lay it down and we can put a little bit of wood chips on top, a little hay on top, some leaves in the fall, or we can step it down, put some compost on top and throw some cover crop seed and see what that does. The idea with chop and drop is to avoid burning material and running a wood chipper and all of that. It's to use hand tools to manipulate the canopy and swap that canopy. I'm going to take a slightly bigger bite out of this alder now with a hand pruning saw. One of the other goals with all this, there's a lot of layers of goal in what we're trying to do here, is by bringing the canopy down and the bulk of the woody material down, future management of this will be easier. So I'm not going to go way high up to do my pruning. I'm going to do it at ground level, and I'll reach in with one hand and cut a branch. Now, I could just wail on it, could use a chainsaw and all that, but it seems like it's nicer and less rude to this plant to cut it with some respect and care. And what I'll often do is take the major prunings that I have, or that I'm doing, drop them off to the side, and then from there be able to go through with hand pruners chew it down and send it, for example, around a redbud. Or around a black walnut. A really valid and maybe very important question is, what about timing? Why am I doing this in mid-late summer rather than the fall, rather than the winter, rather than spring? And to some extent, tongue-in-cheek aside, it's because now I've got the time to do it. That's one reason. But part of the reason is because the alder, when planted, in our minds was considered a utility tree, in that it's not meant to be here for the long haul. It's not going to be here in 50 years. We'd like to have these other slower, more stable, long succession trees here. And so if for some reason the alder passes away because of this management, it's not the end of the world. If what we were doing was pruning back a very high value plant that we wanted to make sure 3 generations from now it was here, we would do this pruning when it's dormant. But that stimulates a lot more vegetative growth. And right now what I'm trying to do is slow these alders down to boost the other plants. So mid to late summer is actually a really great time for chop and drop of plants that are early succession, very fast, and meant to be used as utility and support for whoever's next. This branch can go to serve the needs of some new black currants that are getting established. So I can do my primary cutting with the loppers and then more fine detail in between the black currants. I think an important note to put forward is that to acknowledge that it's kind of hard to make these calls sometimes of, who gets cut, who stays. In nature, there tends to be a massive amount of complexity, diversity, and density in planting. And in nature, some of those elements get eaten by creatures. Some succumb to a heavy windstorm or a particularly cold winter or dry, hot summer. And so we're basically acting as an agent like that, making some decisions so that in the long haul, there's still good diversity, density, and resiliency, but that those plants which can last for the longest time are promoted. So this butternut could be here for over 100 years or longer. The alders in an ecosystem grow very quickly and will fall over and rot and support and stimulate the growth of the next generation of trees. We're acting within that model and appreciating them and valuing them as we do. It may seem like a really raw cut to take an alder and at about 6 feet cut its head off. in the middle of a growing season. But here's the things to keep in mind. Alder's very fast growing. It's very adaptable to browse. So imagine this was just a huge mammal that just ate the top off of it. It knows how to deal with this. For the rest of the season, it'll focus the lower branches on growing and greening up. And in fact, if we did have sheep or goats around, they would be thrilled to have us prune this and feed it directly to them. The alder itself almost certainly will not die. It'll be stressed out, but it'll respond well. And now sunlight can penetrate deeper in. There's a Miabina willow. There are a whole bunch of hazelnuts on the other side. There are grapes through there. Many other beings will be thrilled with that cut. This alder is a little stressed, but it'll be happy in the long run. And its new vegetation will actually be lower where we want that protection. These English walnuts now have a lot more sun around noon or 1 o'clock, and they can become the canopy. And in the long run, 50, 100 years from now, we could imagine looking straight up into a canopy loaded with fat and protein raining down. That is a massive boost of light and nutrient to everyone other than those 3 alders. Now, question could be, or concern could be, around aesthetics. This is completely subjective. That's so ugly, all those branches laying around, all those leaves. Okay, so the plants don't care at all. And in fact, having all of these coarse layers, this will break down slowly and gently over time. The English walnuts have no concern about this. They don't mind about their aesthetics around here. The mint will be happy to sprout through there. By next season, this will be rotted down. Tons of things growing through. If you really don't like the look of it, cool, put some wood chips on top. Put a sheet of cardboard on top and some old rotten hay. Lay some non-sprayed straw on top. Dump some leaf bags on there. Tidy it up to your eye, but know that you do not have to do that. These plants will be thrilled with it. Now, since we're on our neighbor's property, here, this is the living wall food forest boundary space here between us and our neighbor. I probably will put a little bit of hay on top once I've raked and swept the driveway just to make it look a little tidy. And I'll show you what that looks like at the very end. But if it were out in the woods at the main Edible Acres site, this is absolutely good enough. The plants are thrilled. We can move on to the next thing that has to get done for the day. So there's one other way you can go about it too. Chop and drop and cover with some mulch. Completely optional. It's up to you or it's up to your neighbor. I don't think he cares either way, but just thought I'd show you. So last note on this is to encourage you to zoom out from the specifics of what I was saying and look at more of the pattern. It's less about, okay, plant alder 1 foot apart and 5 years later cut them on August 19th. It's more about, what does it look like to plant a lot of plants, add more cuttings, add more seedlings, add more diversity early on, and practice the art of removing the precious from all of these plants. Love them, appreciate them, value them, and consider each and every one of them malleable and adjustable and in some ways ephemeral. So these willows will be cut down in the fall to the same height, but we'll wait till the fall because we can get cuttings to propagate from them. There's all sorts of grapes that we need to cut, but we'll wait till the spring because then we can use those to propagate. Everybody's just got different timing, but you can cut when you have some time. If you've got pruners in your hand and you see a plant that you care about leaning or being under stress because of lack of light, that might be the right moment to cut who's around them. Maybe instead of alder and willow, you've got Japanese honeysuckle and graybark dogwood or European buckthorn or wild grapes or kudzu or whoever. Consider them all as organic matter to be worked with to build and release nutrients, to focus fertility around the plants you have. If they reroot, you can simply cut them again or pull them and drop them right back down. Really, it's just a matter of the intimacy of management. The more frequently you can be looking, observing, and interacting, the better it all works out. So we'll leave it here for now. The English walnuts will be getting a nice surprise in the next few hours when the midday sun fully bathes their leaves and the soil around them is cool and moist. I'm excited for them. This butternut will be doing its stately, beautiful thing. And in 100 years, when there's no way at all that we're here, hopefully today made a positive impact on what that all looks like. Thanks for watching.